Hey everybody, I'm Will. I've got a presentation here for you today with Tableau Public. Throughout this, I'll be showing you 3 techniques that I use to help my work stand out from the crowd, both in the office and outside of it. So sit back and enjoy this one. What this is saying is don't make any investment decisions based on what you hear today. Always do your own research. And if you want to read this in full, feel free to pause this video. Otherwise, let's get back into this. So this starts off with me in my career, and I got into data analysis and namely Tableau because I love solving problems. Always been one of those people that like to go away, do a bit of research, I found the solution, and then go and communicate that back to the person. I actually realised that that takes quite a lot of skills, and whilst I love the solving side of things, I wasn't very good at the communication side. And that became very obvious here. So yes, I was a young man. I entered the world of online dating looking for love, and yeah, I realised I really couldn't communicate very well. Really struggled to hold together a conversation at all. After a lot of missteps and failures on my part, I found myself in a stable relationship. It was a few months going, but there was a pivotal moment coming up, which was her birthday. And I didn't want to mess this up. I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to go back on the market. So I did what I thought, do the logical thing. I just simply asked her, what would you like for your birthday? And this is what she said. Should have seen this coming. I mean, she was a lawyer. They love to do this sort of thing. They love to put down these different contracts for you. And I myself lacked the skills in communication, have fallen straight into this trap. But, not all is lost. I do love to solve problems, so I just saw this as another problem. So I went away, I did some research, and I found something. I found something that could meet this need. I found this beautiful castle out in Scotland. I thought this was perfect for her. Outside in nature, beautiful views, fresh air, she should have a great time here. Now hold on, I'm not made of money though. I'm not buying the whole thing. Actually, we're just going to buy 1 square foot of land in the castle grounds. So by doing this, I think I figured it out. I can afford this, and I've met that birthday wish. So I've solved the problem. But did the relationship survive? We're going to pick that up later on for you. But I wanted to use this just to highlight some of the challenges we have with communication. And when you bring data into it as well, I mean, this just gets even more complicated. And when I was learning data visualization, I built charts like this. So here's what I would describe as best practice. Now, I went to almost like to this church of best practice and led by all the lessons here. So I made very clear, concise titles. I made descriptions. I really wanted to try and convey a lot of information with this work. So you see the bars are all sorted, ordered, all labelled. Got those reference lines for different contexts on the data. Even got the 100% line where we're trying to get to. Also try to use colour and bring that into titles as well. So to convey a lot of meaning quite quickly, quite efficiently. And this is what I made loads of these charts. I mean, it's called best practice. It's the best thing to do. So I thought, okay, I'll just keep making more of these. It was until a couple of months, I had made a piece of work and I had a stakeholder come to me with a new project in mind. They were talking through the requirements they had, and slowly I began to realize that I'd actually already done the work for them like a few months before. They just didn't remember it. Well, I was a bit disheartened at the time, and I wanted to try and develop the skill a bit more, and I had a new project came up, and I thought, okay, let's try and do something new here, something that would actually stretch me a bit more. So I built one of these. I built the Sankey diagram. So I went to Tableau Public, that free repository of data visualizations, and I downloaded the template. So I built this together back in the day out of line charts to make the Sankey model out. And I was really pleased with myself. It was quite a challenge. I was really proud of what I had done, and so pleased with myself. I went on to that call with the stakeholders, so talking through my work, the analysis, what it showed. It was showing flows of financial values across the industry. And then I asked, "Oh, have you got any questions?" It was about this time that the sales chap over in Boston on the call chirps up and he says, "It kind of looks like someone's butt." It wasn't quite the feedback I was expecting at the time. However, their comment sort of sparked a lot of interest in the work and all people trying to say what they thought it was. However, what I then found out later on that, despite what people initially thought of it, was that they remembered this piece of work. It stood out to them. They hadn't seen a Sankey diagram before, but they got them interested in the work and in the data analysis I was showing. And from that moment, what happened later on was that people remembered me because of this work, because of this piece of work. I then started getting invited on more projects. In the future, I'll bring that Will guy in. He's really creative. I mean, personally, I've just downloaded this from a website and put my own data in, so I'm not creative. But it really benefited my career. So later on, got promoted and then pay rises as well, because I had stepped down and done something a bit different. It got me thinking, and so this was the thought that was going through my head at the time. And we always taught it's the best thing to do, but is it? And I wanted to learn more about this, so I went off and I started off where I found my inspiration. I went back to Tableau Public, so this is where you have that free repository of different Tableau data visualizations that you can go and download. These were amazing pieces of work I found, like really stood out to me at the time. I hadn't planned to go and look at like dashboards about blockbusters or Lord of the Rings or Ironman World Championships. But as soon as I saw these, I found myself diving into them, learning a lot more about how they put the chart together, what the data was showing. I was really interested. And much more, I wanted this from my own work. I want my stakeholders come and say, really want to dive in and learn more about my work. And I wanted to know what they were doing. So I went away. I had a little look around about different techniques they could be using. And I found this. Found this concept, this design principle called Van Voorster effect, which says if you saw something that was a bit different, a bit out of the norm, you'd probably remember it. So the example here is if you were going to the airport and you suddenly went on board a killer whale, you'd probably remember that. That's a bit different, stands out from the other planes out there in the airport. So this concept of that these different things may stick with you a bit longer than your standard format. So it got me thinking, how can I try and present this in the field of data visualization and graphics? So I was here, I had this data I was working with about driving tests around the UK. I had the data here, I had my test centres, I had those pass rates, and it left me very conflicted. You had on one side almost like this angel on my shoulder saying, "Hey, Will, you could just make this into a bar chart. That's what best practice is telling you to do. It'd be really quick, really easy to do, and it'd be the best way to show the data, to sort it." But there's also this sort of lingering sort of devil on my shoulder saying, "Well, oh, there is that. You could make a bar chart, but why don't you try doing something different?" So I did. I went and made this. I made this giant map of the UK with all our driving test centres on there. And what I used was this motif from my own experiences learning to drive. So I didn't have a particularly new car, it was quite old, quite sluggish. So I had this concept of, well, or more like I found it quite challenging to drive uphill in this car. So I thought, well, why don't I take that feeling I had and try and present that with the data? So any test centers you see here going uphill, those are more challenging to pass than your average test. Similarly, any cars that are going downhill, much easier test center to pass. So I splayed all these out across the UK using this technique called map layers, where you can go and layer different data points on top of each other. And here you can see some quick insights here from, say, in London. Actually, it's quite challenging test centres over here in the east. Actually, quite challenging in the west and also in the north. In fact, quite challenging all over. And what I found was actually, if you want to go and pass your tests quite easily, just go to quite a remote area. And if you can, go to the Orkney Islands. You have a great chance of passing your test out there compared to the average. Again, this took a while for me to put together, but I was pleased with the result. I had shared it at work with different colleagues, and they were like, "Oh, receptive to the work." They were pleased, liked it. But the funny thing was that it was a year or so later, one of their children was coming up to their driving test, and they remembered this visualization. They remembered this piece of work that I had done about this, and they came back to it, and they could actually go and see the different test centers and which test centers nearby that they should go. They should try and get their test book for. Like, so it does work. You can do something a bit out of the norm, and it will stick with people as well. So yeah, got me thinking. Yeah, you want people to remember things that, yes, doing something a bit different, a bit out of the norm, can make that impression on someone. But I don't just remember the things that are different in my life. Actually, I actually remember quite a lot of things. And one thing I want to show you, a very special person to me. I want you to meet Millie. So Millie is a Labrador pup that joined the family about 2 years ago. Now I don't remember this sort of meek little figure sort of sitting under a chair. What I remember is this. I remember this sort of destructive force that entered our home. I mean, honestly, some days it was like you come downstairs and it was like a scene from Rambo. Something in the night had just been obliterated. But watching this back, it actually evokes this kind of emotion in me. It makes me feel something, this sort of joyful sweetness of these times. And I feel the same way that I did when I first recorded this. And this video lasts for me because of the way it makes me feel. And I remember it because of that. It creates this emotional response within me. And we see this all the time with data visualization as well. So in data viz, you're trying to drive home some emotion, try and have an impact with that audience. So you see here on the left, you have that Iraq's war viz. You really have that visceral image of the blood coming down the screen, really actually kind of evoke this emotion of these people's lives being lost. Similarly, you have a visualization about Tales from Behind the Line, which takes you on a very personal story, like very individual use cases. In this case, one person who had to leave their home, they'd lost their parents, they had no other choice. Kind of makes you kind of think that, what would I do in that situation? Makes you feel something from this very personal journey. So I then started seeing these and thought, well, how can I do this with my work? How can I try and take you on a personal journey? So I found this. I found this piece of research about Myers-Briggs personality types and how they relate to income. So I went out, I did the test, I found out that I'm an INTJ. So the I here means I'm an introvert. NTJ is sort of how I see and perceive the world. And it says very nice things about me. It says, "Oh, Will, you've got a great ambition. You've got all this great drive. You achieve all these goals. So it was, my ego was feeling quite good at this point. I feel like, well, what's my income look like? I found this. I found it was actually quite middle of the road income. Ah, for someone who achieves all these goals, I would have thought I'd have a higher salary. So I had a look at this and I thought, well, let's dive in a bit further with this data to try and learn a bit more. So when I looked by different age groups, and this made sense to me. This made total sense. Like I spent a lot of my career, of the early parts, studying university, learning to code, learning Tableau in my in my 20s, but now I'm in my 30s. That's all paying off. My income's gone up, and hey, it looks like it's going to go up in the future as well. So I feel pretty good about myself, and my future. It wasn't until I saw this. So this is the extrovert alter ego of myself. So the same personality type as me, just that they're an extrovert and I'm an introvert. It kind of says to me like, Will, you shouldn't have spent all that time learning to code, going to university. What you should have done was just learnt to be an extrovert. You wouldn't have any problem now, like affording castles in Scotland at all. And then it kind of sits with me a bit deeper when I realise that actually these things I do because I'm an introvert, like don't speak up so much, avoid being the most social person, avoiding conflict, probably actually holding back my career. That kind of sits with you a bit, makes you kind of dwell on everything that you do, actually holding yourself back. So it had a very emotional impact on me, made me change what I was going to do with my career. Thinking, well, could I do more extrovert things? Let's speak at Tableau conference. So yeah, certainly for me that these emotions do stay with us. I mean, you can always think back to times of great emotion for you. You can always remember how you felt at those times. So they do have quite lasting impact, lasting memories. Now I want to talk about something that I think we're kind of a bit guilty of in the data visualization world. What we love to do with this analysis, we love to jump to the insight. So here we go. I've gone insight on screen. I mean, for most of us, it's not really that relevant. I mean, most of us don't work in construction. Even if we did, it's not very helpful advice here. But what if I was told you that you already knew this and it stayed with you? What if I was to tell you a story about three little pigs? Three little homes that got blown down by a big bad wolf, one of them being made out of straw. I haven't heard this story in decades, but funny enough, I still remember it, even though it's not relevant to me at all. As it stays with me because of this kind of story format. It makes you think, like, how could I try and use that as well? So what I like to do, there's a lot out there on data storytelling, like way more than I can cover in this 20 minutes. But what I like to use here is this 3-act structure. So this is how you can try and think about. You've got a core message that you want to try and share, or core like insights, but you can actually try and divide this over 3 different acts. Okay, so you'd have say an introduction where you're setting the scene, like Act 2 where you try and actually raise the stakes, try and put the impact of why all of this is important, and then that final act where you actually go and here's the takeaway, here's the resolution out of all of this. Okay. Think these in terms of threes, and you try and create this little like storyline. And this is where, and I had to do this. So I was part of last year's IronViz competition. Is where you've got to go and craft a compelling data story on screen live for everybody. So I use this technique here to try and take my audience on this journey with me. So we started off with Act 1. We were looking at education and looking at literacy rates. So here, I started off with quite a basic level, just stating what literacy looked like, who was literate, who was illiterate, and what it meant. You know, if you're illiterate, you can't read or write, you're going to have all these reduced opportunities, and really you're going to have a lot of troubles trying to contribute in society and be independent. So we set the scene. In Act 2, I then went and raised the stakes a bit further. So I actually went and emphasised that there were people behind these data points. You know, this isn't just 80% of the world or literate. What we can see is actually of these people, I gave them names, I gave them locations, I gave them backgrounds themselves. For example, here Tanvi, who grew up in rural India, was able to attend school and then had the skills to bring money back into their home. Because of that, saw like a boost in India's economic output. So not just benefiting the person involved, but actually benefiting the people around them as well. So getting on this like personal level again, like that almost emotional side as well, to say that hey, there's people behind this as well, and it does have an impact on their lives. And then on to resolution Act 3. So this is where you would go out around the world to go and remove illiteracy from around the world. These are the areas we need to go and focus out on to fix this problem in the world. Showing this different map of those different areas. That's my main output, and that's the call to action really for everyone out there. So actually we should be going and supporting education programs in these areas. So here I go. I've kind of divided that up into those 3 little stories. If you took one piece on its own, I'm not sure it would have the same sort of lasting impact on itself, but altogether, I think it does stick with people. Yes, I can say that, you know, you think about all those different stories that were taught, they do stick with you. They do stay with you throughout the test of time. So think about these little like techniques involved. Okay, you may be here. You may be thinking, "Oh, Will, you've spoken to us lots about how it's all about trying to be memorable and all this with visualization, but is it worth it?" I wanted to end on a new example that I have been putting together. So I was working with Google autocorrect data. So I was taking, so you know, you go and search into Google for a term, and then suddenly it auto completes, gives you a list of suggestions what you might be searching about, based on what other people had searched before. So I was doing a project on dogs, and I had different insights like this. I mean, this was interesting to me. Like, you found that these different breeds of dogs had all these different common problems that people were searching for. I found this really interesting, really insightful. You know, if I own a French Bulldog, I would like to know this before buying it. I thought, well, how am I going to get people to notice this? I can't just put out all these different search criteria out. And I had this data set of all these different dog breeds plus all the different things people were searching about them. And it took me a while to think of what to do and how to show the data. I ended up thinking, okay, let's try and make that different looking chart. So I tried to build something radial, something circular out. This are some of the attempts. I mean, this is more abstract art than any kind of data visualization at this point. But I stuck with it. I persevered through these different issues I had. Almost, I ended up with this. So again, when I look at this is a complete departure from everything I learnt about best practice. I mean, look at it. You've got a rainbow color scheme to start with. Radials, they are not the easiest to read. You'd also have bits where like these little boxes are smaller for dog breeds on the inner part of the circle. So again, not the best representation. Also, the radials they aren't completely circular. There's kind of like not quite 45 degrees missing. Like, what does that mean? it's very different. But one thing was that this stood out to a lot of people. This was very different from what they had seen before. It evoked a lot of their own memories from within them about their own dogs. And just something very funny was that it actually started reaching people from beyond field data visualization. Started getting comments from people saying that dogs did similar strange things. We got pictures. It was really interesting to me that we were able to reach people outside my normal audience with this visualization. And this is probably like one of the final things. I've spoken about how it's impacted my career, about how I've benefited personally, but this was something different for me. This actually showed that I can actually bring data to people from outside of the data visualization world, have people make more informed decisions based on this data as well, which really is where I think we need to be going with data visualization, not just benefiting people that already have data in their lives, but actually trying to reach those people that don't have much of this information to hand, and trying to show them what data visualization can do with them. So, not best practice, but it had an impact. So, okay, we got one thing we need to finish up though. We're back in Scotland. We've got that square foot of land. We've that birthday wish of landed property. But did the relationship survive? So, with the square foot of land came a title. So my girlfriend at the time ended up became lady, so had this lady title, which she could then use to go out, book nice hotels, get free upgrades and stuff. Benefited from that. I think it worked. I think I managed to get away with it. I mean, so I can tell you that a few years ago, actually, we ended up getting married. It was a very different day. I was in Hawaii, hence the shirt. It was a very emotional day. My mother didn't stop crying the whole time. But there was one thing that stood out to me, and that was our priest, our officiant on the day. And I won't be forgetting this. So he turned to the families and welcomed them, greeted them to the event, turned to Christabel and said, "Oh, how beautiful she looked." And then he turned to me and he said, "Yeah, I like bananas too, just not on a shirt." Yeah, you can't win them all. So that will stay with me for a long time as well. What I've been talking to you today is all about when you think about visualizing data, putting together this information, don't just think about how can I convey this the quickest, easiest way, but how can I try and make a memory with my stakeholders? I want them to remember this work. How can I forge that memory with them? And I've given you these techniques here today. So we spoke about doing different things that stand out from the crowd. A bit odd sometimes, this killer whale coming into land. We can also think about forging a little bit of emotion. So maybe you want to take that user on a personal journey. They can have their own story crafted out based on a few parameters. And lastly, think about the stories you want to try and tell. Don't always try and jump to the insight, but take them on a journey with them to get to that answer in the end. Try and forge that memory with them using these different techniques. Appreciate your time. If you have any comments about this stuff, just drop it in the comment section below. Keep an eye on this video. There was a survey. I think this is closed, but yeah, as I say, just drop them in the comment section. If you enjoyed this talk, I did say that there's quite a few other talks out there that are related to this, so I think help you along the way. So Zach gave a talk about This Is What You Love. I think it's very great for the motivation behind putting out these personal projects on Tableau Public. Tristan had put together some amazing tools to make those very different visualizations with Tableau. So all the stuff you don't get out the box with Tableau, you can now make. So some of these tools, and I've been really excited using some of these. And then lastly, Lewis was bringing it back to the workplace. So we've gone a bit out in our own personal projects. Lewis is bringing it back to the workplace, saying not just about the data, so do check out that talk as well. Hope you've enjoyed this. As I say, any feedback, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.